Today's lesson is an introduction to ASP .NET MVC. We're not going to be using any database. We're just going to try to keep it as simple as possible so you can understand what the basics, and maybe another time it's worth it to look at databases and all that stuff, but I want to keep it simple. So the first thing I want to do is, of course, let's open Visual Studio. Here it is. Now, to create an MVC application, you'd go File, New Project. And I'd choose this first one. Okay? And let me save it someplace. So I'm going to call it MVC World. Now the option we're going to choose is MVC here. And at the bottom, you can, if you want, mix it with web forms by checking this at the bottom, or you can mix it also with Web API if you want to. So I would uncheck web forms. Web API maybe, but one thing you might want to do is you might want to check unit tests. Unlike web forms, with ASP.NET MVC, you can actually conduct test-driven development. You can do unit tests. So let's do that. And I won't spend too much time, but I'll just sort of show you a few tests that we can do, some basic tests. And let me click on OK. Okay. Oh, so what happened here? Yeah, these two, I choose MVC and click on OK. And let's go to our MVC app. Now, before I continue, I'd like to start my Zoom it here. Let's look at the folders that were created for us. The most important folders are the Models folder, the Views folder, and the Controller folders. In ASP.NET MVC, it's all about convention. According to the rules, you're supposed to put your controllers in the Controllers folder, the Models in the Models folder, the Views in the Views folders. Now let us sort of understand what are these, what's a model, what's a view, what is a controller. The view is the presentation. In most cases it involves the HTML itself in this world. The model is where you put your business logic and your classes and your data. That's the model. The controllers are essentially the recipients of the requests coming from the user. So the way it works is this. So going back here, let's look at some other folders. This content folder contains your CSS and your image files. The scripts folder contains your JavaScript files. The app data directory typically contains the data, the database. Now there is this app start directory that I'm going to discuss in a second. Okay? I think we've covered most of them. And then you have your fonts, if there are any special fonts. In this case, there are some glyph fonts here, glyph icons that have been put here. Let us run this. Let's run the application and see what it gives us. So we go Control F5. What's happening here? Okay, here we go. Now, you get 3 pages here: home, about, contact. If you look at the URL line for home, it just points to this localhost with a port number. If you want to go to about, it goes /home followed by /about. Okay? And if I want to go to contact, the URL line has home contact. Okay. Now, the only thing that only one that's different is just home. Home seems to not have any sort of / this or / that. If we register a user, note here that in the app data directory at first, if I open the folder, it's empty. The moment I register a new user, a database gets created. And that database gets created in the form of a SQL Server Express database with a file called something or other .mdf. So I'll create a user, a@a.a. When I register, the first time around it could take a bit of time because it's actually doing some things behind the scenes, but that was pretty fast. So now if I go to that folder in my app data directory, sure enough you can see that there's a database file. In Visual Studio, it doesn't still appear there. It doesn't appear here, but you can force it to appear by clicking on this thing here, this icon here, which is described as the icon for show all files. So let me click on that. It lights up the files that are hidden. So I can right click on this file and choose include in project. Okay, and it will include it in the project. And then once I do that, I can turn this tool off. Now I can see my database. The name of this database has been dictated by the config file. The config file is this web.config file. If I open it up, there's this connection string here, and the connection string, it actually has in it this complicated name. You can change this complicated name if you want to something more simple, but it has it here as ASP NET MVC World blah blah blah. It's very long, so that's where that name is dictated. If I want to see the contents of that file, I can double click on this and it will open up in this so-called Server Explorer, and I can see the tables in this database. These are the tables that have been created. You can guess that most likely the last table, which is the one ASP.NET users, this one here, probably is the one that has the data that I just produced when I created a new user. So you can double click on that one. This is the design. Actually, what I should have done was not double click on it. Server Explorer. Where is it? Server Explorer, here it is. I should have right clicked and said show table data. And here is the table data. You can see that this is the user I created. This is the email address I created. So that data has been saved in the database. The nature of this database is actually not necessary. It's not actually SQL Express. It's something called LocalDB. Let's go back to the config file. If you look at the config file, it says data source LocalDB. LocalDB is a lightweight version of SQL Express, very lightweight. And the signature for that database is this LocalDB followed by MS SQL LocalDB. Okay? If it was SQL Express, if you had SQL Express, it would look something like this. It would look like /SQL Express. This is the signature of a SQL Express database. Okay? Now, let's look at the controller. There are three controllers here. The account controller is responsible for authentication. The manage controller is responsible for managing users and roles. And then this controller here, the home controller, is the one that provides us with these three pages: home, about, and contact us. Let's open up. Today we're going to focus more on the home controller. So let's open up this home controller. And you will see here that the home controller has three methods. It has three methods: index, about, and contact. And you can see that these match one-to-one the pages that are on the menu, right? Here, you see we have three of these: home, about, contact. If you go here, they match those one-to-one. The index page is like the home page. And then you have the about and the contact us. These are called action methods. This is the home controller. These are action methods. We have three action methods. Let's look at something else. If you look at the routing rules or the address rules, for example, I come here and I look at the address rules. This is very important for you to pay attention here. This first part of the URL represents the controller, because we have a home controller, therefore that part of the URL has the word home. The second part of that address is the action method. Okay, so let's go back here. If we look at what we have here, to address this index page, you have to do something like this. You have to go /home/index. You might ask, is ASP.NET addressing, is it case sensitive? And the answer is not. You know, if I come here and I make this all uppercase, it will still work. So it's not case sensitive. At least on Windows it's not. It will still get there. Actually, home. Let me do it again. You see, it's not case sensitive. Let's go back here. So actually, let me just make this all lowercase, home index. So to get to this page, it would be home index. But you might ask, but we didn't see home index. Over here, when I went to home, there was no home index. It just went to the root. That's because home index is the default page. If I come here and I enter home/index, it will still work. I don't need to do that because it's the default. To get to this page, I must enter home/about. And to get to this page, I need to enter home/contact. Okay? So now we see how the addressing works, what the rules are. You might want to change those rules. So I'll show you where those rules, the routing rules, are kept. In this app start directory, there are a bunch of files that make up the configuration of the ASP.NET MVC, and one of them is route.config, this one here. If you open this file, you will see that we have some routing rules here. You see this part here, it says that the routing rule is that the first part of the URL is controller, the second part is the action method, and the third part is ID. Now we haven't seen a third part. We just saw the first two parts, controller and action. Look at what the defaults say. The default routing rule is that the controller is home and the action is index. That's why you don't need to enter home index. That's the default. If you don't enter anything, it's going to go to home index automatically. And then the third thing here, ID, it could be part of the URL, but it is optional. You don't have to use it. What is this component in the URL used for? It's used for passing parameters, like product IDs, customer IDs, and so on and so forth. You can enter it as the third part of the URL. So this is where the routing rules are. Some other files that you find in this app start directory, one of them is bundle. Now the idea of this bundle is that in order to make certain static files download faster, by those static files I mean your CSS files or your JavaScript files, you can what we call minify them. Minify means get rid of long variable names and use one character for those variable names. Get rid of all new line characters and space characters and somewhat compress them. These are called minified versions of your CSS files or your JavaScript files. So this bundle, it does two things. It minifies, and another thing that it can do is it can take multiple CSS files or multiple JavaScript files and actually fuse them together or merge them together. So as an example, this one, for example, what does it do? It creates a script bundle by this name. This is the name of the bundle, and it includes all the jQuery.validate star. Now if you look at jQuery.validate, let's look at what we have here in the scripts folder. jQuery.validate. You see, we have jQuery.validate min, jQuery unobtrusive min. It's going to take all of these and put them together into one file, and then it will minify them. It does the same thing for your styles. It can minify the styles. So here you're creating a style called content CSS. It's going to minify your bootstrap.css and your site.css. It's going to combine them together and deliver them. So when the user downloads that, it's going to be a much smaller file and it's going to be one download instead of two downloads. But this doesn't happen unless you compile in release mode. You see, when you do it in debug mode, it doesn't do anything. Make sure that you change debug to release mode, and that's when this optimization takes place. Okay? So that's this file called bundle.config. Another one that is interesting is identity.config. This one here, startup auth. If you open this file, one thing this one allows you to do that's pretty interesting is we have now just created a user using database, the SQL Server database. ASP.NET MVC allows you to use open authentication. And open authentication is basically using social networking authentication. Instead of using a database, you can pass on the authentication duties to Facebook or Google or whatever, GitHub or whatever. So imagine you want to use Twitter. If you want to use Twitter, what you do is you come here and you uncomment this. You uncomment that, but from Twitter, you have to register as a developer, and they will give you a client ID or an app ID, an app secret. These are different names for the same thing. There's client ID, client secret. Twitter, they call it consumer key and consumer secret. In any case, they give you an ID and some sort of a secret. If you put that in there, it will just work. There's more work getting the ID and the secret from Twitter and Facebook and so on than it is actually getting it to work with ASP.NET MVC. So this is pretty interesting. Okay? So these are the type of files that you have under app start. Now, let us see if we can change anything so that we can affect a change in text or something. So we looked at the controllers here. So we have these three controllers. In the models folder, we have some models and some model views. We'll come to this later on. And then under views, we have to learn something, that for every controller there must be a folder for that controller under views. So we have three controllers. We have an account controller, a home controller, and a manage controller. And over here we have the account folder under views, the home folder under views, and the manage folder under views. But there is one extra one. There's another folder called shared. And the shared folder, it has views that can be used anywhere else. Let's open up the shared folder and have a look at what there is. The most important of these views is this one called layout.cshtml. The view layout.cshtml is pretty much like the master page. It is the master page. It is the main envelope that other views are injected into. Okay? So let's open this up and have a look. Layout.cshtml. You see here, this is where those bundles we talked about, they get loaded here. This is where we have our main navigation. These are the three links that are on our home page. We have three links for home, about, and contact us. These are rendered here. And this particular page, it uses Bootstrap. You can see from these classes, navbar, container, these are all Bootstrap classes. This here, render body, this here is the injection point for our other views. All other views, they get injected in here. It is really the content, the main content area. There are some other injection points. One of them is this here, this render section. This is another injection point in case you want to inject any JavaScript selectively into for specific pages. So this is the layout.cs HTML. We might want to change, for example, the main title of our page. I might want to call it, let us say, the MVC Hawk, something like that. Okay. And I might want to change the footer here and call it MVC Hawk. So that's our main master page. And I said that we have 3 view folders here that are associated with the 3 controllers. Let's now open up the home controllers view folder. This has 3 pages. And the 3 pages, they match the 3 action methods. Because when we opened up the home controller, we had 3 action methods. Each action method must have a view. This is the rule. So I did mention something about convention. And the convention is, whenever you have a controller, that class is called the name followed by the word controller. Like if I want to create a controller called Sunshine Controller. The controller is Sunshine. My controller name has to be called Sunshine Controller. And then under views, I must create a folder called Sunshine. And for every action method in the controller, I must create a view file here. Now, if you look at this view file, let us look at, for example, the about. What does the about show us? Basically, it displays, use this area to provide additional information. Let's go to that page here and look at about. Here it is. Use this area to provide additional information. What are these? View bag title and view bag message. To understand this, let us go into the controller. So the home controller, and let us look at the action method. So here's my home controller, and let us look at the about action method. In this about action method, I'm adding this message into a view bag called message. What is a view bag? Think of a view bag as being a bucket. You're throwing some object into a bucket. And this view bag is a bucket that can be passed on from the controller to the view. Now, what's the significance of the word message? The significance of the word message is that it's the key for a dictionary item, because view bag is essentially, it's a dictionary. And you give it a key called message. I can call this whatever I want. Talking about the theme of sunshine, let's say I call this sunshine. It's anything you want it to be. If I call it sunshine, I have to go to the view, the about view, and retrieve it instead of message as sunshine. Because you're putting something into a bucket and passing it to the view. And then the view receives it and uses it. So if I say sunshine here, it will still work. Just to prove to you that this is going to work, let me go back to the controller, and in my view bag sunshine, let me put, for example, a bunch of pound signs. Okay? And I'm passing it as a sunshine key in the bucket. Now, whenever you make a change to the C#, you should compile. So I'm going to compile. And then I will come actually I stopped it. I stopped the app. So let me run it now. So if we go now to About, you can see that my pound signs, they just showed up. So what have we learned here? Well, the key that you use in the view bag can be anything you want it to be. It doesn't have to be message. It can be whatever you want it to be. I can pass any object. Let's try something else. Let's come here in the view bag sunshine. Let's do something else. Let's go view bag. Instead of sunshine, let's make it rather rainy. Rain equals to, it is pretty wet outside. Okay? I'm passing a view bag called rain. Let me come into About, and I can actually display this. Let me make this H4. And I can say at view bag dot rain. Again, because I changed the C#, I need to recompile. Okay, so let me come here and refresh. So you see here, it's pretty wet outside. Here we go. This has showed up. Okay? So now we know what a view bag is. And you remember I said the job of the controller is to select a model and pass it on to the view. What is the model here? The model is what you put in the view bag. That's the model. You're creating a model and handing it over to the view, and the view renders it. Okay? Now let us do something more interesting. Let me come here in the controller and let me create a new action method. So let me copy this. And I'm creating a new action method. Now, what shall I call this action method? Let me call it bogus. It's a bogus action method. Okay? And in the view bag message, let me say view bag message bogus. This is a bogus message. Okay? Now, if I want to hit this in my browser, how do I do that? Okay, home/bogus, right? B-O-G-U-S. Now, I think I didn't compile. That's why I didn't do it. It didn't find it. I forgot to compile. Now that it's compiled, let's try it again. You see, this is expected. It crapped out. It crapped out because I didn't follow the convention. Remember I told you that for every action method, there must be a view, a CS/HTML file. So it actually, the error message is pretty clear. It says, you know, I looked into these areas and I didn't find a view. It looked into the home, the shared, in these folders, it didn't find a view. So I need to create a view. Now the quickest way to create a view is to right-click on the action method, bogus in this case. If I right-click on the action method, I can say add view. You see this one? Add view. It's the quickest way. Add view. It's going to ask me, what do you want the view name to be? It should be bogus. So I'm going to say add. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of saying h1 bogus, I'm going to display the controller, this view bag bogus. Okay? Let's see if this is going to work. Now, when you do anything in the view, you don't need to recompile. But if you change something in the C#, you need to recompile. So hopefully now, without recompiling, I should be able to refresh here and it should find it. Okay, so that works. What did we do? We just created an action method, but for that action method, we had to create a view. And we added some data to the view bag and we passed it on. Now, the next thing we can look at is here, what is this? What is this block? At, open brace, and close brace. This is called a razor view section. In this block, you can put any C# code you like. For example, let me create an array of, let us say, seasons. Okay? Winter, spring, summer, fall. This is some C#. I can render that using razor, which is this syntax. I can come here and say, open an unordered list, and then in here we can iterate through that array. And I can say here, open a list item and display this item here. Okay. If I refresh, you see, it iterated through it and it displayed it. It's called razor view. One thing you should appreciate is you can mix HTML with razor view. Notice that inside of this block, between the open and the close brace, you actually have some HTML. So razor view knows what is code and what is not code. So we were able to create an action method. Let's take this one step further. Let us create our own controller. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to avoid using a database because I don't want to make it too complicated. So I'll try to read the processes that are running on my computer using one of the classes in C# that's able to do that. And for you to appreciate what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to go into PowerShell. And if I go into PowerShell and I say get process, this gives me a list of all the processes that are running on my computer. I'm going to read this in a controller and display it. That way I don't need to go to a database. Okay? So I'll leave this window open here. So if I want to create a controller, I would come to controllers and say add controller. At the controller level, I just said add controller. And these are different kinds of controllers that I can add, but I'm going to take the most simple of them all. I'm going to create an empty controller. So I'm going to select empty controller and go add. Now for the name, According to convention, if you want to create a process controller, the class has to be called process controller. So I'm just going to put the word process here. Process controller and add. So it creates for me this controller with one action method, which is index. Okay? So now in this index action method, I want to get all the processes that are running on my machine. And I know that there's a class called process. This is probably not known, but I'm going to resolve it. So I'm going to resolve it by doing this, and it's going to find the namespace. It belongs to the namespace system diagnostics. So if I go process.get processes, this get processes, if you see the signature of this get processes is going to return an array of process objects, right? So let me use that. So over here we'll say get processes, and this will return an array of process objects, and let me call those procs equals to process PRO1C. In C# we normally just put a var here, right? Just easier coding. So I can say var procs is get processes. I can, if I want to, add this to a view bag. So I can go view bag dot processes equals to procs. So I'm adding it to a view bag, right? Now if I go to process index, it's going to complain to me and say, hey, you didn't create a view. So let me preempt that and create a view. So I'm going to right click on here and add view. And it's going to create for me an index view, and see what it did. It created for me, under views, it created for me a process folder, and in there it created an index.cs HTML file. So in the index.cs HTML file, let me iterate through this. But before I iterate through this, it's a good idea to cast the contents of that view bag to what it is, because once you put something into that view bag, it will forget what type it is. Okay, so that view bag dot processes, we want to cast it as system dot diagnostics dot process objects. I need to cast it as this. Okay, so let me come here and say var procs equals to this. What did I, okay, you see I'm actually casting what's in this view bag. Now I can iterate through it. So I'm going to go at for each var I in procs, and we'll do like we did before. Let's put an unordered list here. And list item at I. So because we did a bit of C#, we need to recompile. And then let me run this. So I go in here, and to get to that, I should write process. I can put index if I want to, but I don't have to, because index is default. It's the default view. So this should get me that page. You see, I didn't specify what property I want in the process object. So over here I should say I dot process name. Here. Like this I can actually display the process name. And because I did a change in the HTML and the view, I don't need to recompile, I just need to refresh here. You see, I get the process name. These are all the processes that are running on my machine. That's a lot of processes, because it's been a while since I rebooted this machine. So things are just running. Okay. Wouldn't it be nice if I could click on one of these processes and display more detail about that process? And also, wouldn't it be nice that if I have a link up here that I can click on to take me to processes, instead of having all the time to have to type that in the address line? So let's start with the second nice to have thingy. I want to have a link here, process. So where would I do that? Where do you think I should go to create that? The layouts, right? So let's go to layouts. And I'm going to copy and paste some code based on what they already did. I'm just going to repurpose what they already did. So if we go to layouts here, the links that they have given us are right here. So I'm going to copy one of these and paste. It's the action link. This is called the HTML helper class, and it's got a method called action link that produces these links. And if you hover over this and see what are the arguments that it wants, the first argument, it wants the display text. Then it wants the action name. Then it wants the controller name. Okay, so let us just enter those things. So the display text, I wanted to say process. What is the second argument, which is the action method? It would be index. And the controller, it is processes. That was the controller name. Remember? So the controller name, so it's process controller, sorry. Process. Because I can see here, my controller is called process. And maybe my display should be processes. Let's refresh and see if this is going to work. So if I refresh, you see, I got this menu item. If I click on it, it takes me to where I want to go. The next, nice to have. Suppose I want to make this clickable. So when I click on it, it's going to take me and give me some more detail. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to take this code, because since I want to create a link, I can probably take this code and repurpose it in my index view. So this is my process name. Let me just park this temporarily right here and repurpose it. So what is the thing that I wanted to display? What I wanted to display is the process name. So I can probably put this here. What is the action method I wanted to go to? I don't have an action method yet. But let's assume I'm going to call it display. I'll create an action method called display. Okay? And what about the controller? The controller is the same controller that serves this page. I don't even need to tell it. Because if you don't tell it what controller it is, it's going to assume it's the same controller that's serving this particular view. What I can do is I can pass the ID. The way to pass an ID is to say new You know what, now that I've done this, I can take this, cut it and put it in here, because that's exactly what I want to use. So here I'm going to pass ID equals to I.id. This is the way you create the link. This is what displays, this is the action method, and this is the ID that you're passing on. Let's save this and let's refresh here. You see these created links, and if I hover over any of these, you can see down here that it is actually passing the ID. It's doing exactly what I wanted to do. But of course, if I click on one of these, it's going to crap out because I did not create. Look at the URL here. This is the ID, this is the controller, but this is missing. This is missing here. I didn't create it. So I have to go now into the controller and create this display method. So let's do that. Let's go to the controller and create another of these methods. This should be bogus. And let me copy this and repurpose it. This one I'll call it display, and in the comment it should go to display, but there's something different here. I'm just going to say it will take an ID, example 5 or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, something, whatever, I don't know. Okay, and this is going to be passed. But how does this action method receive it? It receives it as an argument, int ID. Okay? You know what? I made a mistake. I put this into the home controller. This is not in the home controller, it's in the process controller. My mistake. I'm going to cut this and put it into this. I put it in the wrong controller. Here. This is where it belongs. This is process. Process display here. So this is how it receives it. Now, how do I actually use this ID? Let me repurpose this. So the process class, it's got a method called get process by ID. I'm going to pass it the ID, okay? And this is going to return one proc. And this one proc, I'll stuff it into the view bag and send it back to the view, right? So now let's create a display view. We don't have one yet. So right click on here, add view. It will create for us the view. Over here in the view, I can display this stuff. So maybe a nice way to display it is to create a table. And say TD. I'm going to create 2 cells and maybe 3 of these. Now, we're going to receive, let's go back to process controller. I shouldn't call it processes. Maybe I should call it just process. We're just receiving one process, one row. So we're receiving this view bag process. Let's go to here. I'm going to cast this as system.diagnostics.process. Okay, and I'm going to say var a process equals to, this is what I'm I'm getting, right? So over here, I can say process ID. This would be process name. And maybe here, handles. I think there's something called handles. So going back to my PowerShell, I'm going to show the process name, the ID, and the handles, these three things. Okay, let's go back here. So for process ID, I'm going to say show me at process.id. Okay, this one would be at process.process name. At process dot handles. I think there's something called handle count. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. Compile. Okay, that's done. So let's go back to this page. Let's refresh. And then let me go something like Dropbox. Okay, here we go. We got exactly what we wanted. Dropbox. The process ID is 8120 and the handles are 2161. Okay? Can we actually send the actual class without a view bag? And the answer is yes. So what I'll do is, just so that to demonstrate for you how to do that, I'll do this. I'll close all these windows. And I just want to have the process controller and these two views that belong to the process controller so we don't get confused. Display and index. So let's look at the process controller. I'm going to copy this and create another action method called index2 just to make it different and show you how that works. So if you want to pass a concrete class, what you do is in the view you pass that concrete class as an argument to the view like this. It basically ships it to the view. Okay? So now let us create a view for this index2. So I'm going to add view. It's going to call it index2. That's my index2 view. Now when you pass a concrete class, you're basically, as I told you at the very beginning, that the job of the controller is to pass a model to the view. So there's a keyword called model. The model that's being passed to the view, you have to specify what type it is. It is enumerable of type system.diagnostics.process. You have to tell it what kind of model is being passed here. And you can only pass one model. Okay? So now, when we iterate through this, let me use the same code as I had here. So I don't have to duplicate this stuff. But instead of iterating through procs, we don't really have a procs here. But what we have is a model. And you see your IntelliSense will still be there, because if I come here and I say I dot process name, the IntelliSense is there. It knows what type it is because you told it this is the model that's being passed. Okay? So I just did index 2. What I should also do display 2. So let me create a display 2. Let's say we have another display also that uses the same mechanism of passing concrete classes from the controller to the view. So come back to the controller. Just like I did index 2, I'm going to do process display 2, sorry. Copy this and have a display 2. And display to, what it does is, it passes this proc to the view. And this is a concrete class. Let me create a display to view. Display to. And again from display, just like we did before, we have to tell it what is the concrete class that's being passed here. And the concrete class is one process, not a collection, one process. When we display only one. So it will be system.diagnostics.process. Okay, and then let me copy this code from here and put it here. But here, instead of saying process, this is going to be the model. Let's try it out. Let's compile. And then go in here and go process index 2. And if we hover over this, it's going to index 2, if you can see it here, right? It's going to index to display 2, display 2. So let me go SQL writer here. And sure enough, it's going to display 2, and it's giving us the same information. But what did we learn here? Instead of passing view bags around, you can actually pass a model. The only limitation of the actual concrete class is that you can only have one concrete class that you pass on. You might say, okay, if I have more than one class, how do I do that? Well, the answer to that is that you can use view bag. You can use a concrete class and view bag. Or you can create what we call a view model. A view model is another kind of class that contains your both classes, right? You can put a class in a class. You can create a class that's composed of two other properties. Each one is a class in its own right. And you can pass that on. So there are solutions to this. Okay? So, what else can we do here? The one last thing I want to show you is something called a partial view. And a partial view is something like this. Let me go back into Paint. Suppose you have a web page. Sorry, I should actually not use this. Suppose you have a web page. Is it this one? No, I want to use this. Suppose you have a web page here, okay? And then there are certain parts of that web page, certain piece of code that you want to use multiple times. You want to create one piece of HTML that you can either use multiple times on the same page or multiple times on multiple pages. This is done using something called a partial view. So I'll show you what that is. And I'll do something very simple. But before I do something simple, let me show you a partial class or a partial view that Microsoft created when they created for us this template. If you go into shared and you look at layout, okay, here they're using a partial view, login partial. You see that? And this login partial, here it is. It's in the, what did I do here? Control Z. It is actually in the shared folder here, login partial. So let's open that one up and see what it is. The convention for using partial views is you start the name with an underscore. It's a convention. So if you look at login partial, it's got an if request is authenticated, which means that if the user is authenticated, you want to display a log off button, and you also want to say hello Bob or hello Jane, right? If they're authenticated. If they're not authenticated, you want to display two other buttons. You want to display register and log in. So this is what this is doing. This is where a user is authenticated, and this is where a user is not authenticated. You display for them the register and the login button. This is a partial view. Let us create a partial view. So I'm going to come here in my process, and I'm going to create a partial view. So I'm going to say add view. And when I say add view, there's a checkbox here to create a partial view. So let me check this, and the name of my view, I'm going to say hello. I'm going to start it with an underscore just because I want to follow the convention. But even if I didn't put an underscore, it's still gonna work. Underscore my partial view. Click on add. And when you create a partial view, you get absolutely nothing. Look at it, it's an empty page. There's nothing in there. Okay? But it created for me this file, mypartial.cshtml. There it is. So let's assume that I want to put something very, very simple. I'll just put some markup here, just so that to emphasize what this is all about. So let's say h3 style equals to, say, color dark green, for example. And let's say is ASP.NET cool or what? Okay? So this is a partial view. I should be able to stick it into any other view that I want to stick it into. Let's stick it into this display 2, for example. I can come down here and say, I'll use the so-called HTML helper class. So I can go HTML dot partial, and here I'll put the name of this partial view, underscore my partial view. Okay? I don't need to put the extension. Now, the stuff that I just did, it did not involve any C#. Therefore, I don't really need to compile. All I need to do is refresh. So this is my display 2, isn't it? Okay? Here it is. Now, just to prove to you that it's not linked to an action, suppose, you see, I put this in display 2, which is associated with the process controller. Suppose I want to use this in the home view. Let's see. Okay. Let me go to the home view. So under home, let's say go to this bogus. You remember bogus? Okay, let me come and put it here. Now if I put it here, so this would be home bogus. What happened here? You see, I got another error. And the error I got here is, I can't find your partial view. What do you think the solution for this is? Because we put it under process. If you want to share partial views across controllers, they don't put it under the folder of a specific controller. Put it under shared. You see what I mean? I put it, the way I did it here, this partial view, I put it under the process folder in views. This means that only the process controller can use it. But meantime, what I wanted was, I wanted to use it for this bogus view, which is under the home controller. Can't find it. So the solution for this is to take this out of here and put it in shared. You see what I mean? When you put it in shared, multiple controllers and their views can use it. Right? So now that I moved it, if I come here and refresh, it should work. There you go. This works, and process detail display 2. We should make this display 2. It works. Now, because it is much more professional to use concrete classes rather than view bags, I would probably go back to my layout and get my layout to use index 2, because index 2 is a better solution than index 1. Okay? I put both of them there for you, so that you can see how both work. But the better is, if you can avoid view bags, avoid them. Okay? So let's come here and refresh. And when I refresh, this process should go to index 2. When I click on this, it goes to index 2, and now I get my, is ASP NET cool or what? In green. Okay? So this is pretty much what I wanted to cover. So thanks a lot.